गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। वणकम, प्रणाम एंड गुड इवनिंग।
Good evening, Jai Hind to everybody. Welcome all participants to this Gunner Shot CASA webinar on multi-domain warfare. We have for you an extremely eminent panel, General Atta Hasnain, General KJ Singh, Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, Dr. Tarak Karta would be joining us shortly, and of course our moderator, General Shankar. Now, the participants, we would like to tell you that we on CASA have been discussing this issue of multi-domain warfare, about hybrid warfare, and what it entails for quite some time now. And we decided to have a shot of it and see what India can do in multi-domain warfare. Right through all these years, we've known that warfare is essentially in three domains: land, air, and sea. Subsequently, we're looking at space, we're looking at cyber warfare, and then on to many other interesting domains. I will not steal the thunder away from General Shankar, who's got a wonderful slide to put across to tell us what multi-domain warfare. He'll make a short introduction, and then we will continue the discussion. Thank you all, and welcome to this wonderful seminar. Over to General Shankar.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And at the outset, I'd like to welcome all the panelists on this web discussion. It's an honor for me once again to talk to all of you. And it is you who make CASA and give this discussion the stature it has. We all know that in the past 3 to 4 years, the talk of the town is multi-domain operations. Gray zone operations have come to the fore. We talk of asymmetric operations. And these terms, multi-domain, asymmetric, and gray zone, are used very freely without really understanding what they are. So first, let me define, or rather put in context, what are multi-domain operations in the way I have looked at it. I've been talking of this for the past 3 to 4 years, and I'll explain it, and it is in that context we'll go ahead. Right. If you look at it, this is my model, or rather a larger model of the multi-domain warfare, which happens, it's where it's neither peace nor war. It happens day and by night, where the means which are employed in this multi-domain warfare are hard and soft power, conventional and non-conventional power. The actors could be state, non-state, state-sponsored also, like NGOs and MNCs. And what are the constituents and the domains of this game? You have the traditional air, land, and sea domains, which are almost red, light red. Then you have the technology-driven domains called space, cyberspace, nuclear, electromagnetic spectrum, which are in green. Then you have the traditional domains of energy, resources, politics and ideology, diplomacy, and economy, where we have quite used to these domains, countries fighting through these domains. And these days, these domains are also being, I wouldn't say taken over, but technology is coming in a big way. Then you have typically the Chinese oriented domains. I wouldn't say Chinese oriented domains because these domains everyone is using these days, which is the three warfare strategy domain of influence operations, legal, and public opinion, which I put in the yellow circles. Right? And these are being, which the Chinese brought into the forefront in a big way. Okay. Now, these three domains are also driven a lot by technology. I've added health after the pandemic has settled because that's not going anywhere away. And right, yeah, we have Dr. Tarak Karta also with us.
Welcome,
And
welcome.
I was just, good evening and welcome to this discussion. I was just explaining to everyone the various domains in which these days operations are taking place, right? The air, land, and sea domains, space, cyberspace, nuclear and electromagnetic spectrum, then energy, politics, ideology, diplomacy, and economy, and then the public opinion, legal, and influence operations. And health, as I was saying, I've included health as a domain post the pandemic. Okay, this is the context of multi domain operations. But today we're going to talk of multi-domain operations in the context of India and Pakistan. We've been discussing, for long, what Pakistan can do to us in terms through these various domains. But we need to think what we can do to Pakistan and how do we handle Pakistan through these multiple domains. And mind you, it's not only war; it's in war, peace and war both. In any even in this gray zone, the famous gray zone, all these domains become active, right? So we're going to discuss these in detail as to what our broad options are, what our broad methodologies are, what our doctrine should be. Is this is what it. I am aware that in public forum, this is probably the first time we are talking on these terms. So I have no problem if all of you give different ideas, which uh, in, through the domains in which you have expertise, because this is an exploratory kind of a thought process. So what we'll do is I'll give, I request each of you to take about 5 minutes to give your initial thoughts, and based on what you speak, we'll pick up ideas, and then we'll go ahead with our further discussions. I'll first invite General KJ Singh. Sir, I request you to give your thoughts on multi-domain operations in the India-Pakistan context. Over to you, sir.
Jai Hind and good evening, everybody. And it's for me very challenging thing because I am a gully mohalla cricketer who's been put on a stage which is dominated by IPL champions like Al Hasnain, Ambassador Anil, Tarak Karta, and Shankar and Gautam Murthy. But I'll try some, village shots and try and get by. So, Jan Shankar, I looked at your presentation which you had made with Adi Achin. I think Adi
Yeah,
Achin.
yeah, Adi Achin.
So, I would tend to give for your consideration that you could classify them like what you're calling as basic, as maybe kinetic, including the posturing. Call the second set, which are in the green, as technical. Call the third set as
We
traditional,
lost you.
but get the health and climate over there. If you remember, our Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh ji mentioned that our border areas are seeing very disturbing kind of climate patterns. Is it
Yeah.
engineered? And then you could, instead of giving Chinese too much of credit, you could call it cognitive, because you are
Okay.
moving into
Our
cognitive
Raksha
domain.
Mantri Rajnath Singh ji
So I
Right.
hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
So, so cognitive, we could call it. It would be better. And also, uh, as I look at the whole thing, I feel, which I have said in your earlier program also, China is our primary enemy. Pakistan, or primary adversary, let's say like this, and Pakistan is a permanent one. It's an irritant but permanent one. There is a collusive mechanism working. The basic rationale is push down India, pull up Pakistan to parity, and as we look at Pakistan, we find that there is a multi-domain collapse in Pakistan. It's an imploding institutional collapse. Ummah factor has gone out of reckoning. Nobody is coming to its aid. Strategic depth option is getting lost. So, in this entire chaos, Jan Shankar, I hope you can hear me. Okay. So in this entire chaos, uh, we need to be aware that we have to build capabilities against primary adversary and draw collateral benefits from those capabilities. So somewhere getting too fixated on Pakistan is actually a distraction. We should not get too distracted by Pakistan. We should develop capabilities which, against Pakistan, use them collaterally or in a test bed kind of a mode and draw benefits from that. We must focus on multi-domain asymmetry against Pakistan, which is happening, which is happening on its own. Some of it, nobody can stop it. It is even happening in spite of governments, because demographic dividend, youthful profile, all these things are self sort of generating kind of attributes. So, but whatever we do, we must maintain a facade of deniability. There are instruments which are watching, and in Hindi they say Ati Sarvada Varjayate. If you will overdo it, FATF and others will come into the act. So deniability by government agencies has to remain. Soft and hard, okay, but I will call it smart power, because you have to be smart enough not to be blamed for it. Uh, we need to have offensive defensive capability, and somewhere a demonstrative kind of punitive capability. What I say is, like putting down Karachi Stock Exchange for say 48 hours, and then somebody ringing up the Pakistan NSA and telling him, listen person, this, some people have told, it's been very unfortunate, can we be of any help to you? So capabilities like this have to be honed and developed, but in a denial mode, outsourced to some other people, not by government agencies, because uh, if you get caught out, then there's a hell of a lot of to pay. Uh, I also feel that narratives, external and internal, need to be decoupled. Somewhere, internal compulsions, domestic compulsions, are driving us towards certain bit of irrationality, and that is avoidable. That we need to be, a mature democracy like ours has to work out mechanisms. How we keep them in two separate silos and only draw some benefits out of it. Uh, we have, and we don't have to worry too much about Pakistan, because osmosis effect is taking place despite stopping all soft power exchange. Ghazal singers and all others, Pakistani media is saying, why don't you do what Modi is doing? See what India is doing. We have become their role models. This is despite us stopping the flow of soft power. So today, there can be no firewalls like that. Uh, I feel that long term capability building must, like IWT, but great mechanism we have. So it's long term without making too much noise. Reservoirs take nearly a decade to make. When I was army commander, I pushed for Shahpur Ghati, and it is now, operationalized 7 8 years. So uh, we should, and civil military fusion is inevitable. Structures we have to ape is like Pakistani ISPR. What a wonderful organization that is. Why can't we have something like that? Lawfare is very much required. In India, like Chinese model, we have to work on lawfare. Our law universities are doing some basic projects. Why can't they projects like our claims in Doklam, our claims on various border stretches, Sir Creek and all? Why can't we have projects like that? Why can't we have cartographic studies like that? And conflict resolution is also important. If we'll resolve our conflicts within, then everything will fall into place. And finally, in jest, because it's election time, the way our social media and IT cells are operating, elections will be over. Then we'll have one nation, one election. So in the time which is in between, this skill base, if it puts half the effort against Pakistan, Pakistan will be sunk. The way they do it against each other, I think it should be turned towards in that direction. I think
Yeah.
here I'll pause and
Uh,
we could go to the next speaker.
yeah. Thanks a lot. So I think you made some very, very interesting points. Uh, a certain amount of osmosis is happening soft power wise, and we need to maximize it. That's the first thing. A multi domain collapse is taking place in Pakistan, which we need to probably hasten, and with a lot of deniability built in. Uh, the important point which you made of decoupling our internal and external narratives and avoid irrationality in the narratives which we build up is thought a very pertinent point. And there's no harm even learning from Pakistan in terms of civil military fusion structures like ISPR and lawfare. Lawfare will probably have to learn from Chinese, and the ISPR is a good model. I won't say to replicate, but to learn from. Right, conflict resolution you spoke, and I thought that was an interesting thing. If half the effort of our politicians, which they put in their IW against each other, if they put it against Pakistan and China, we'll handle both of them very well. So I'll take it one step forward, and I wish our politicians have this capability to turn their narratives outwards. Right. Very interesting point, sir. And with this, I'd request our good ambassador Trigunayat, sir, your views on the subject of multi-domain operations in the India-Pak context.
Well,
Over to you.
thank you, sir. I think that General Singh has very clearly and aptly focused on nearly every issue that one could think of. But there are a couple of comments that I would like to make is that Pakistan, uh, no doubt we have given undue attention. And because of that, Pakistan has successfully been able to bring India down to their level in the international forum. So while we have to protect our interests, we have to protect our borders and work against their strategic depths that they have acquired in India, especially with regard to use of the radical forces, using cross-border terrorism as an instrument of their foreign policy. That is something that bothers us. But that should not give us enough kick to somehow react on everything that happens in Pakistan or feel happy about it. We need to work on certain positives because, see, while the neighbors may be a gift of history, but it may be a gift of geography, but they are the pains of history. And Pakistan is one of those. But our problem is not necessarily from Pakistan. It may be an irritant, that's it. But our bigger problem is going to be from China, which will be in every which way a major challenge in every geography for us. So we need to work on that. And China and Pakistan definitely are in collusion against India, and they'll continue to remain so. At least in the near term, I don't see any change happening, even though we may buy some kind of a peace with the Chinese in due course. So that is one that we need to work that how to counter that particular domain in which they have been able to do. We have tried to expose them, but the global geopolitics is such that Pakistan is able to encash its nuisance value with every major power, be it the Chinese, the Russians, the Americans, or the West, for their own interests. But they have been able to leverage it, and that is something I guess we would need to learn. And it will be difficult for us to do so because we believe in certain strategic autonomy, whereas Pakistan believes in being a part of some kind of an alliance or an appendage to anyone whosoever can pay for it. So I think, but Pakistan is at its weakest. And at its weakest also, it can be a dangerous uh, country and a dangerous neighbor for us. And with China, it will become a much bigger threat to India. And that's something we need to be mindful of. Of course, gray zone warfare is something that we need to develop a very robust communication strategy. I don't see that any way we can dissociate the domestic from our neighbors. The factor, Indian factor, or the Pakistani factor, or the Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, because of our neighbors, they also share the same geography with our states, many of them. And therefore, whatever happens in India has an impact there and has an impact on India's interests also. So I find it very difficult somehow. We have been constrained by our own internal domestic reasons in our dealings with many countries, including with Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and others. We are seeing during the elections also these issues are being raised. What did whoever did that? So that is something. But what we are doing now is, in my view, that we have been able to some extent, create a rift, or it has happened by itself, but it is good for us, in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I mean, that is something that is a major worry has been for us. And I think that that is being handled very smoothly by India in recent times. And there is a bad situation between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that is a good thing for us. One thing is, in Pakistan, there is definitely a constituency from leaders down to the ordinary people, which one comes across through various media commentaries, through comments here and there, that they are grudgingly accepting a successful India, which is growing much faster and can be of greater help to them. And so there is that constituency which, if somehow we are able to nurture and uh, spread a little more and make it more critical to become a catalyst in creating that constituency. So that will by itself generate a very different kind of a force, I believe. Now we are in a very peculiar diplomatic situation that even during the Kargil, I don't think we call back our ambassadors. But this time, for years, we don't have ambassadors in the country. We have big missions, but the big missions, they have their limitations without a head of mission. So I think that the situation with Pakistan, I don't see changing very fast. But let me say at the outset, if at all anything good happens with Pakistan, that can only happen when we have a strong leader like Prime Minister Modi. He had taken earlier, tried to bring about, because see, we have to deal with the neighbors at all the time. They are there, they are a reality. We have to contend with them. And many people think that we should talk, but talk on what and on what terms? In my view, they should be our terms. So I'll stop here, sir, and we'll take it from
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot for your intervention. Uh, One thing which you have, said is that in a different form, which what General KJ Singh said, that Pakistan is a gift of geography and a pain of history, and we have to live with it. Okay. Uh, yeah, and Pakistan leverages its structures and its location, and the challenge is how do you deleverage this? And I've always felt that, like you rightly said, Pakistan is the dangerous foe, more dangerous foe than China, the more unpredictable foe. And somewhere we have to get this unpredictability down, notwithstanding the fact that it is internally collapsing or whatever you call it, right? And we need to increase our gray zone capability, and we need to increase our gray zone capability through better communication strategy. This is something which General Hasnain and I have spoken about often, right? uh, yeah, a very important point which you have mentioned is that there is a rift in the afpak area, and keeping Pakistan occupied on the western border should be our prime diplomatic aim in some form. And I'll get back to you on this particular question later. And we need to exploit that constituency in Pakistan, which has started accepting India and its growth story. Very interesting point, sir, and it gives a completely different dimension to what General KJ Singh had said. Now I'd request Dr. Tarak Karta, Madam, all yours, India Pakistan in the multi domain scenario. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, General Shankar. My apologies for being late as usual. I'm really
No, no,
sorry.
no. That's very minor. Don't worry.
Okay, just I'm going to go over this very quickly. See, in terms of Pakistan weak or strong, there are two factors. As Pakistan, as we deal with them, which will never go for the foreseeable future. One is their nuclear capability, right? Because they have that, they will always get an economic drip. You know, they will come if somewhere or the other people will come and give them money. So they'll never. I mean, there's a constituency in this country who says Pakistan will break up. It's not going to happen. As a nuclear state, nobody is going to let Pakistan break up. That is point one. Point number two is as a sponsor of terrorism, it is the news. It is not just, just not just about that it operates under the nuclear umbrella with terrorism, which we all know. It is that it trades its terrorism for various diplomatic uses. You've seen that it will give its, it will send Uyghurs back to China and get something. It will send recently, I mean, sometime back, it sent back Abdul Malik Regi. Remember, he was shot down, Iranian terrorist. They sort of connived at that. So this is a strategy it makes. Also, we know. But the thing is, in each of these, in the nuclear domain, what it gets is a certain status in the worldwide thing, which you and I we can't do anything about. I mean, some years back, I remember, not some years, quite recently, they got elected into the Human Rights Council. I mean, can you imagine a country like Pakistan getting elected to the UN Human Rights Council? So the nuclear status gives it a certain degree of what shall I say, a dignity which we should, in my opinion, try to erode by underlining the very real dangers that are attendant to a state which is in such disarray and has a nuclear weapon capability. We are not doing enough. That is number one. Second thing is in terms of the fact that every time you talk of Pakistan, might, abroad, if you talk of Pakistan as a dangerous state, the immediate thing is, oh no, Pakistan might collapse, because it's a nuclear state. These are the dangers. We must find ways to support Pakistan. You had South Africa, which gave up its weapons. You had an entire former Soviet Union, which gave up weapons. I mean, there's a whole history of how nuclear weapons were very carefully taken away. How come nobody thinks about it in Pakistan? That narrative has never come. Yet it should. That is point number two. In terms of terrorism, it is the other way around. It is not a strength for Pakistan. Nowadays, it's a weakness. In terms of legal aspects, it is a weakness because, according to all UN bodies, you're not supposed to sponsor terrorist groups. Yet it does so. Have we put the pressure on Pakistan? No. Why is it that legal pressure is not being applied? Number two, in terms of economic costs, which they are doing themselves, in terms of the terrorist aspect and so on. Third is in terms of their diplomacy. They cannot defend terrorism. And in my opinion, while we have brought it up at UN, blah, blah, we have not pushed this factor enough that this is a terrorist state. That's why I'll stop there. The other point I'd like to pick up from what General KJ Singh said, which I thought was, in fact, everybody said, is that the main problem is not Pakistan, it is China. Agreed. Right? There is also the Pak China collusive nature, which was also agreed. But right now, then it raises the question, do you really need Pakistan as a enemy or as a frenemy? Right? There is a distinct tension between these two states now. Number one. Number two, the weaker Pakistan is, the more Chinese ingress there is. The Chinese stranglehold on Pakistan is getting stronger, especially after the last terrorist attack. They know when a terrorist act occurs before the Pakistanis do. That is the kind of ingress they have. So for those people who are saying the weak Pakistan is, oh, it's very good, it's not. So there are tensions between Pakistan and China. They always have been. It's a cultural thing. The Chinese don't mix with the Pakistanis. They keep themselves aloof. in terms of their loans, in terms of so many areas. There are tensions between the two. Have we taken note of them? We haven't. Then I'll raise the last issue. In fact, this, or should I stop now? I think I'll
No,
stop
no,
here.
please go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
There's one more issue I want to raise, which we as Indians should realize. You know the Kashmir law where you could not buy land, etc., blah, blah, at one point of time? State subject rule. That same rule applies in POK. How is China buying land there? How is a special economic zone operating in POK, in Gilgit Pakistan? There is a host of legal issues involved, which needs a little research. Try going on the net and finding one article in terms of what are the land issues in POK. This is nothing. And yet the laws are the same on both sides. You see, so you have a country which is giving away land to China, part of it, which is not part of it is not constitutionally, Gilgit Baltistan is not part of Pakistan, right? Yet the army is operating, okay, let them operate. But look at the financial implications. Any bank which has to give a loan to a project which is in Pakistan, I'm sorry, in Gilgit Baltistan, the first thing to be assured is whose land is it. So I'm not talking of India or something. I'm talking of local land ownership. It is There is a difference. There is a host of laws. If you look at them, how it has been changed. So there, that is another area which you can exploit in terms
Yeah.
of the Karakoram highway. So I'll stop there.
Okay. I think you brought a new dimension to the whole thing and a welcome dimension. You've spoken of the nuclear capability which gives Pakistan a status, right? You've spoken of terrorism, which Pakistan purposes for various purposes and which is becoming an increasing weakness. The third point you highlighted was the Pak China collusion, which is full of tensions at this point of time and a weakening Pakistan, right? And it gives a lot of leeway for us to do what we have to do. And then you spoke of POK, its status, and why we don't contend it. So, and of course, you did also speak of how do you defang Pakistan of its nuclear weapons. So I'll get back to you on this because I think the legal aspect of this is something which we have always not focused on too well, and we'll have to see how to handle this, and that's how it is. But I'll get back to you, madam. Uh, with this, General Hasnain, sir, your views on India, Pakistan, and multi-domain operations. All yours.
Thank you, John Shankar, and thank you, fellow panelists. Some outstanding ideas which have been expressed so far. I'll be brief. I have about 7, 8, 9, 10 odd points which I'm not going to elaborate at all. It starts from the fact who started it. It is Pakistan which actually employed hybrid, multi-domain warfare in Jammu and Kashmir. In an era in which all we thought of is kinetic, right? And thereafter, over a period of time, as we remain completely stupefied in our response and continue to respond in the kinetic domain, a change came about, and now you see Bajwa doctrine, which was spoken about by General Bajwa at least 2 or 3 times, may not exist actually in reality. But Bajwa was expressing his ideas and thoughts, and none of them were in the kinetic domain. Things had changed around. Now, once again, we were supposed to be actually looking at how to look at the hybrid domain, how to respond to Pakistan, but both sides, it seems, India and Pakistan, seem to have got paralyzed in intellectual thinking, could not take their thought process beyond. I'm glad this is probably the first time that this subject is coming up for discussion at all. Because frankly saying, the Indian Armed Forces do not study it deeply enough. There may be an odd dissertation written here and there, and that's about all. But when it comes down to the final count, or it is always about kinetic and it's always about conventional. Having said that, In hybrid, one of the most important principles you will have to follow is that do not look for outcomes. We have this habit. People who have conventional military thinking always think everything in terms of victory and defeat. There is no victory, there is no defeat in gray zone. This is it's a long-term thing. Everything gives you a certain advantage, puts you back, dilutes your advantage, puts you at a disadvantage, brings you back into a situation of advantage. That's why this multiplicity works, and that's why this whole multi-domain system is something which is so outstanding in its concept. Having said that, we must examine the whole aspect of the ceasefire with Pakistan. Not been spoken of so far from a military aspect. Who does it benefit? Does it benefit them? Does it benefit us? This is an ever-going debate in Indian strategic security circles. Do we really benefit from it? Or should it happen that over a period of time you have breaks in ceasefire, etc., and it keeps Pakistan, it keeps the other side on tenterhooks? Or do we remain on tenterhooks? That's something for us to examine. The fourth point that I'm trying to make is when your adversary is fighting you hybrid and you trying to make it kinetic, it will never work. It has to be hybrid versus hybrid. It doesn't have to be exactly the same domains being addressed against each other. There are weaknesses in Pakistan, there are weaknesses on our side. They will continue to address them. We must go stronger and identify the exact weaknesses, the exact domains in which our pressures will continue to work. Denial. This subject was also spoken about by General KJ. Very important as a principle. You can't, in this kind of concept, you can't be upfront and say, what I'm doing, this is exactly what I'm doing, and admit to it. Over years, you can have systems of denial, right? Denial after denial. I mean, there's a denial as a policy. Denial as a strategy, which is something which Pakistan has perfected, if you remember, right through the Kargil war. It was all denial after denial after denial, which kept working. My sixth point, which I'm making on this, is that pressures, we will have to see how do the pressure system work? How do they converge? How do various domains that we are addressing, how do they converge to create a certain degree of pressure which we want to impose? The seventh issue which I want to bring about as a principle is without networks, nothing works. Without networks. If you've seen what happened in Jammu and Kashmir, everything here depended over the last 30 years depended on networks. The moment the networks started collapsing, the hybridity of this whole thing started collapsing by itself. So you have to create networks. Can't be created overnight. They have to be created in a long-term thing. So you have to realize here is extremely long-term. You're not looking at 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 8 years. No, it's absolutely wrong. How to give yourself that strategic advantage? Then the whole aspect of our own irrational enmity, very correctly brought up. I think it was brought out by General KJ, then brought out by Ambassador Anil also, and by Tara. This is a very important point. Unnecessarily bringing about irrational enmity, muscular nationalism. It's good, no doubt. This patriotism is a very good thing, but nationalism is a very good thing. But if taking it into the irrational, you then suffer the effects of that internationally. You suffer it in the international media, which is why much of the international media tends to go against you. So this is something that you ought to follow as a principle. This issue of diplomacy, and that's where Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, his presence here is very important. The whole aspect of diplomacy, making Pakistan irrelevant. This has to work. This has to be a multiple domain thing by itself within diplomacy. Who all do you address? Those big powers which are inevitably on Pakistan's side, or are on our side and inevitably will take a break from time to time to go back to Pakistan to sort of work on their sentiments. The United States of America does it very, very often. You've seen it after working 8-10 months. pressurizing Pakistan, all of a sudden they'll go back $450 million package for F-16 support or something like that. This is an inevitable thing which keeps working. You have to work on this. This is where Indian diplomacy has to do a lot of homework on this. And my 10th point here, before I address one, two other issues of specifics, my 10th point here is dilute Pakistan's Islamic importance. You know, its importance in the Islamic world is out of proportion. Yeah, it's got 220 million population, there's no doubt. It is in a very crucial strategic location in Southwest Asia. But despite that, it should not be occupying that kind of a strategic importance within the Islamic world. The Islamic world has many other important nations. You have Indonesia itself, you have Malaysia, you have, so many nations we can name. But Pakistan seems to be dominating this each time. And we need to therefore have some kind of a leverage over these nations. We have worked well with them. Our relationship in the last 10 years under Mr. Modi has been, for example, with the UAE. It's become transformation. With Saudi Arabia, with Jordan. Ambassador Anil will probably tell you much more about it. With Jordan, our relationship. Many of the Islamic countries with whom our relationship has developed to a great extent at the cost of what their relationship with Pakistan is. So these are some of the areas, or rather, I would say, principles on which these things will have to work. To just touch peripherally 2 or 3 issues of domains which we need to look at. Of course, the cyber, the technical, all that is there. But the cognitive, very, very important, the cognitive domain, because I think our cognitive part of it is now coming of age. And I don't see too much emanating from Pakistan of late. Not very much. In fact, it's much more perhaps emerging from here. And if you just leave it to General Shankar, he will probably invade Pakistan with all his intellectual thinkings which have been going on, all these programs which have been going on over a period of time. You go back to YouTube, the amount of stuff you find on it coming out from different think tanks, good think. I think we have taken the lead there. We need to look at it, where to take it, how far to take it, where to take it. Is there a requirement of a change of or tweak maybe here and there? That's something for us to look at. The aspect of media. Pakistan's media is an outstanding media. I'm sure everyone will admit that. It's a media can find fault with everything within Pakistan. Right? We need to work with the Pakistan media rather than being against Pakistani media. Right? And perhaps create dissensions within Pakistan based upon that. So that's a domain which we haven't really touched upon too much, but it plays a very important role on the cognitive side. Ideology. I think one thing we have to realize, Pakistan has no schools of ideological thought within Islam. Everything is here in India. The Darul Uloom is here in India. The Barelvis owe their thing to Rai Bareli. That's where it comes from. So why not engage intellectually with our own set of Islamic intellectuals to create the right narratives which can be played upon the Pakistani population, instead of allowing all kinds of extraneous or radical ideologies to prevail upon them? Easier said than done. It's going to be a huge challenge. But it's something which can be done if we understand and recognize it. And perhaps the last issue, nuclear. Everything will be under a nuclear overhang. All this will be under a nuclear overhang. We got to realize this. Pakistan seems to have got a thinking as if India is non-nuclear, that India doesn't have a nuclear weapon at all. The kind of manner in which their body language comes about when they talk about nuclear, it seems they are the only nuclear power on the subcontinent. We got to convey it very clearly who can play this game, who are playing this game. We need not be very silent about our own capability. We need to project and we need to talk about it. I think I'll call it a day here and look forward to any other intervention required.
Thanks a lot, sir. I think you made a lot of points, but I'll pick on the crux of what you've spoken. It can't be kinetic versus hybrid anymore. It has to be hybrid versus hybrid. And kinetic has to take a backstage as a backstop or a back support for whatever hybrid actions you do, or a follow-on force for your hybrid actions that you do, which is, I think, very important. Uh, then the next thing which you made very, very correctly is about the ability of ours to go into the cognitive domain and invade their media space and, you know, get to their mind. I think which is very important, because hybrid, cognitive, gray zone warfare, these are all country cousins which we need to study a little more in detail. Right. The next point is, how do you make Pakistan, you know, what it's Islamic, or rather water down its Islamic importance. I think that is something which we have never touched upon. Right? Pakistan considers itself as the champion of all Muslims in almost the entire world, and it has got that this thing for many reasons, including its nuclear capability, all that. So I think we need to think deeply on this. And then, of course, the issue of that the nuclear game is not one sided. And for some reason, whether it's with Pakistan or with China or with anyone else, I will call what we exhibit nuclear silence. But I'll come back to that a little later. We need to be a little more vocal about what we have. Right. Okay. So we've had a very interesting sort of a discussion. We've got some very good points. I'll get back with General KJ Sir. My question to you, spend a couple of minutes each, and then we'll take some questions, because there are some very interesting questions coming up in the thing. I'd request you to be a little brief. Uh, what do you think are the structures we need to put in place to ensure that our kinetic and non-kinetic domains start integrating? Because today, if you see, we brought out, there's a distance between the two. How do you make that happen? That's your thoughts on that.
Shankar, I'll take the liberty of just filling in a little bit on
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
earlier
Please,
discussion.
please, sir. Please, please,
One
please.
is that Pakistan's nuclear thing is, we need to put it, it is only a Sunni bomb. Like, it has not got anything traction. There's also an Iranian bomb coming up, which is a Shia bomb. And despite this bomb, nobody's got protection. Islamic countries are being targeted. Secondly, our capabilities of MAV have to be put across to them. Uh, there is this discussion we did about Islam, political Islam. Now, the thing is, while Ummah traction has gone down, no Ummah element is coming to aid Pakistan. But the fact is, we were very lucky with a person like Imran Khan, who very foolishly tried to make an alternate axis with Turkey, Iran, and Malaysia, and got caught out, and Saudi Arabia then kicked him. Now, Sharifs are back. They have a war with Saudis. So we have to double our efforts on that front. And one model which I read only today, in Indonesia, uh, the clergy is playing very good role in putting across climate action. They are telling people to make green mosques, you know, and they are saying that, like you do your namaz, you have to plant trees. Like you do your waqf and your zakat, you have to do this. And this message is resonating in Indonesia. So this model needs to be maybe uh, strengthened. Why not, like what Jal Hasnain is saying, why not we, with so much of capabilities, Devbandi, Barelvi schools, why don't we take this up, join this effort? And like what you say about structures, the macro thing in this is continuity. After elections, I hope our parties can sit together and make some kind of bipartisan kind of a consensus on what has to go into a long-term package. See, in America, both Republicans and Democrats today are agreed to the fact that China has to be checked. So we also need to have consensus on some aspects of this particularly, because this will all be subterranean, not discussed, not spoken of, denied, yet with consensus of both parties. Maybe everybody has to be, important parties have to be kept briefed also, and their views factored in. So, Jan Shankar, we need to have like civil military fusion, political military fusion. Because in our country, I'm sorry, Ambassador Anil and Tara Karta professors or strategic thought leaders, it may sound as if I'm building my turf, but I feel in India we suboptimally utilize the military potential. We see countries like America, the defense secretary is a former theater commander, and all their important, some of their very important functionaries have come. Uh, so there is a, and I in this I compliment the current government, the way it is trying to put diplomats, military diplomats, into African and other countries. We need to take this forward. We need to give an operational orientation to our strategic thought. We have to, in terms of deniability, in terms of, while results will not come fast, but we have to remain focused and know what we are doing. And like now, finally coming to what you asked me, structures, there is definitely a need for us to look at Chinese model. If China has got a strategic support division, it's a good model to follow. We need to have these structures in place. We cannot do with just a cyber agency, space agency. We have to have full-fledged organizations coming in. And it's an investment. We have to do it. It can't be just wished away. Ad hoc structures, committee approach doesn't work. Will not work. This
Yeah.
is sorry, but
No, no,
uh,
that's fine, sir. I
we
go
should
with you.
possibly
I
think.
think, yeah, I completely agree with you. Which you raised a very important thing of politico-military fusion, which I feel for, throughout 75 years of our existence, if you really look at it, examine our wars, examine our peace, everything, you have politico-bureaucratic military diffusion, and that has been our bane so far, and we need to change this, right? And I've done a complete show on this, and I'm prepared to go once again. And probably after the elections are over and the government is in, maybe we'll have a discussion on this so that the government hears this thing. And as far as military diplomacy is concerned, uh, Ambassador Trigunayat and I had discussed this in great detail. I'd also discussed this with Ambassador Gurjeet Singh when he was here, that the requirement of military diplomacy is increasing by the day. And as India rises and its power becomes more, you need more military diplomacy and not less, right? And not only that, our own diplomacy, the diplomatic core of India, has to also expand. With the kind of diplomacy which we have today, they are very good diplomats, but they're very few in number and not consistent with what we have. And this is a point which was brought home to me by the ambassador himself. So that's where it is. I leave it. I'll get to the ambassador, sir. You made a very interesting point, and I think it's a very valid point. The best Pakistan is one Pakistan which keeps looking westwards and doesn't look towards us. And if you see in the past 1-2 years, Pakistan, after Afghanistan in its present form has evolved, has been more focused that side, and it is less focused on us. And of course, I always maintain that the CPEC is the third front of Pakistan, which is the hottest front of Pakistan, which is running internally, and ours is today the coolest front. How do you keep them focused there? Is the challenge. And that, I think, is part of a multi-domain effort which we have to undertake. And your views on that, sir?
Oh,
Ambassador.
absolutely. So I fully agree. I mean, now today, the whatever government we have in Afghanistan, Taliban is a reality. And if we have dealt with the military governments in Pakistan for more than half their existence, and worked with them, fought with them, did whatever. So I think that being very punctilious about many things as far as Taliban or others are concerned is difficult, because we were always worried about this uh, USA leaving Afghanistan in a complete conundrum, because we had the bad memories of the 2000s, and we could have had that terrorism and everything coming to us under the garb and with the help of Pakistan. But today, that situation has changed quite significantly. Pakistan itself is being Talibanized, and that's what is their fear. And therefore I don't see that that's going very quickly anywhere. You rightly mentioned about Baluchistan, which is another geography which is in Pakistan going to be a major problem for them. So to a great extent, Pakistan's hands are full with the major problems at hand, but it is also getting support from the West. And as was mentioned earlier, they do play these games. And General Hasnain mentioned that perhaps our diplomacy has to play a more proactive role. And I will guess that military diplomacy combined could be a very good factor. What I find today is, still today, I'm not that convinced that we have a robust communication strategy, which should be a holistic strategy. What are we trying to project? What are the narratives? Have we studied the enemy properly or not? Do we have enough information about them? For example, I mean, General Hassan mentioned about we have completely failed in, I would say, leveraging our Islamic card with the Middle East and the Islamic countries. There are 57 of them. Majority of them, I was, as late as 2 days ago, I met a former advisor to President of Tajikistan. He had no clue, or Turkey for that matter. I met the Turkish delegation there. They had no clue that we are the second or third largest Muslim country in the world. They say, oh, is it? Now, you see, that makes a lot of difference. In Jordan, when I spoke to the chief of royal court, they had no clue about this. Just the fact itself makes such a big impact in their making choices with Pakistan. Under Prime Minister Modi, happily, our policy in West Asia has been the most successful part of our foreign policy in the past 10 years. And I have no hesitation in saying that. But at the same time, we'll also have to be mindful and play these to our advantage to that extent, so that that factor, the Islamic factor that they're able to encash off and on and off and on, could be neutralized and stunted. So that's where it is very important. I fully agree with all the other points that have been made, and I think that very accurately made. It is a long deal. We don't have any single narrative about this. We are mostly reactive. I guess we need to have a proactive approach and a strategy made in that regard. What do we want? How do we want to reach? How do we want to be seen outside? Now, until unless we have that thing very clear, we will continue to have these ad hoc kind of policies and deal with situations as and when they crop up. There will always be new situations, but at least the standard game plan or the playbook that Pakistan has, we know very well about it. And I think we should be able to do a much better job on that than what we have done by simply just shutting the door. Today, Pakistan is engaged there. So 2003, whatever agreement we had, still holds, at least in theory, on the borders. And that's giving us a little respite. So this is a time to prepare effectively on all these strategies, multi-domain that we are talking about.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. I think the most important point which you made is you have to switch from being reactive to being proactive. And your narratives have to be reactive to proactive, not muscular in nature. And for that, you need to have a very good communication strategy. And you have to leverage your strengths. Yes, I completely agree with you that we have underplayed our Muslim population which in India, which is, I think, the second largest population we have in the world. For some reason, we have not done it. In fact, we played it the other way around. Okay. In fact, we've converted our strength into a weakness, and combine it with what General KJ Singh was talking of bipartisan political, thinking. In fact, which General Hasnain also mentioned. I think a lot of things can be done in this. Yeah, and we need not. While we have shut the door on Pakistan, you doesn't mean you shut communications with Pakistan in a different manner. Your strategic communications should go around the door, or over the door, or through the door, without opening the door. That is something which we have to develop. Madam, uh, you spoke about the thing of defanging Pakistan and the legal initiatives which we need to take against Pakistan. I would like you to dilate on this, because these are things which we have rarely spoken of. We have always assumed that Pakistan can't be defanged. We have always assumed that POK is theirs, right, for the taking. So how do you start doing all this? That is something which I think all of us are interested in.
So can I just take one or two
Yeah,
points?
yeah, yeah. And please, any point you have, then we can get to these points. Please.
Uh, See, we keep saying Pakistan, Pakistan. Let's please, in our policy, separate the fact that you're talking about the Pakistan military. The Pakistan people dealing with them is entirely different. So when we say what is the policy you should use, we are saying how should we deal with the Pakistan army. The establishment, the civilian leaders are in a different kettle altogether, right? Arising from that, what General Hasnain said, I really want to take up. The media in this country. You notice the Pakistan media, they don't talk about us the way we talk about them. It's shameful. The way some of our TV channels react on Pakistan is pathetic. So it is not as a far which we are. You don't need to go down to such levels to talk about Pakistan as being entirely one criminal country. It is not. So let's grow up a bit and understand that arising again from that, what General KJ Singh said about military diplomacy, I think when the next government comes, if you're going to restart the dialogue, which I think we will, have a military person as the diplomat in charge. Because basically you're talking to the Pakistan army. That's why I began from there saying that who are you talking to? You're talking to the army. Who do you need here? You need a military diplomat to talk to them. Because you have to understand where they're coming from. That arising. So if we go step by step, General Hassan, one thing I disagree with you. I don't think Pakistan has the same status it once had as an Islamic state. I mean, look at the way Saudi Arabia and everybody is going. The Pakistanis themselves realize that Saudi Arabia, they're all going towards modernity, and Pakistan is going backwards. So they don't have that Islamic state. Arising from that, I also slightly disagree with the ambassador. I don't think we should start our diplomacy on a Islamic, we've got this Islamic. The way Modi government has been doing it so far, I think is fantastic. Let's go with that. Now, coming to the point which you wanted me to talk of, see, uh, we did the attack in. There was this whole thing about Pakistanis being targeted. In Pakistan, they're being killed. India is doing this. Do you know that you're allowed to do that under law? There is international humanitarian law allows you to target someone in a state which doesn't act on its obligations despite repeated legal and other complaints. If you've given a state the legal thing, so is so and so the terrorist, is this, is that, and that state does nothing, you are legally allowed to target that person. So that's what I'm saying when I say there are a lot of legal loopholes you can use, and to say that so and so, this is what we are allowed to do under international humanitarian law, under the law of the interstate conflict, you can do that. In terms of if you carry that to nuclear weapons, it may not be legal, But you can stay, you can make that debate run that Pakistan as a state is better off without nuclear weapons because it is an extremely dangerous state, which it is. Right? So that it's, and in terms of a legal aspect coming back, Chashma, the Chashma nuclear reactor. How did they get that reactor when the Chinese are under obligations not to supply that? They yet did. Did we raise a fuss? We didn't. So that's what I mean. I mean, I will go back to what Ambassador Trigunayat said. There is not enough knowledge in this country on these minutiae in Pakistan. There are rulers, former rulers of Gilgit Pakistan, whose land it is. Where are these people now? So do they have a claim? No, and in terms of, I keep going back to this. Whose land is it? Recently they had I think they almost completed it. It's a project under CPEC. It's the Mokpandas Special Economic Zone in Gilgit Baltistan. That land, they kept fighting over it because compensation was not being given because they could not decide if that land came under village land or it came under that what we call the wasteland, in terms of what the state has. That fight went on for ages and there was a huge fight over compensation. So these are the minutiae which we need to look at. Now, in my last point, what I want to say something again with them, somebody in the questions had asked whether trade is good between India and Pakistan. That will create the networks which General Hasnain is talking about. You remember when trade was going through, there's hundreds of people benefited. So there were people with a stake in seeing that the conflict did not take place. Now just imagine, for the sake of imagination, think of a trade going through Gilgit Baltistan. Do you think through POK, nobody there will want terrorism because he has a stake in making sure that conflict does not take place. So those are the positive networks that you can create, which is precisely why Pakistan will never let you go into northern areas. I mean, into what they call Gilgit Pakistan. You remember when all this dialogue was taking place, they talk about POK. They will never talk about Gilgit Pakistan. No question of entry because they know that the moment you start creating these trade and we say, the border is irrelevant, they are the ones who lose. So I'll stop there.
Okay, thanks a lot, ma'am. I think you made a lot of issues, and a thing which we need to really take home is that in Pakistan, we should be clear whom we are addressing at each point of time. Are we addressing the people of Pakistan? Are we addressing the people of POK and Gilgit Baltistan? Or are we addressing the Pakistan army, right? And are we addressing the larger international society through Pakistan? So our communication strategy and whom we are aiming and for what effect
Yeah.
is something which we have to restart thinking about. And then we have to really start reading our histories through a legal angle and recreating it so that we, are on the right lines. And I go with you completely. The rest of the points will I'm sure that some questions will come up. General Hasnain, sir, you spoke a lot about the asymmetric capability development and gray zone and things like that, and the cognitive domain. And we've spoken about it also that we need to be, proactive on this. How do you think we should go about this whole story? And of course, if you have any points, you're welcome to comment.
Thank you. Some very good points have emerged in the second round of interventions. I fully support what Tara has said about media. I once again go back to reinforce that. Indian media has played against national interests all this while because they're addressing the wrong element in Pakistan. They just don't know who they are actually addressing. Right? That's number one. But having said that, I fully also agree on networks. This whole business of trade community. There are lots and lots of different intellectual networks which can emerge between both countries. But at the same time, if you are fighting, if you are against Pakistan on an asymmetric way, then there have to be negative networks also created at the other end. That's what I was meaning. That's one. But the issue on which I'm not in sync with what Tara has just said is this issue which Ambassador Anil Trigunayat and I both endorsed, the aspect that Pakistan's Islam and India's Islam was one earlier. This was subcontinental. It is the Jamaat-e-Islami, Maududi's Jamaat-e-Islami in Pakistan. It is Ziaul Haq after 1977 who turned this entire thing around, and ours became a benign Sufi-related Islam, while you find a completely vehement kind of Islam which has grown in Pakistan, especially on the Western front, on the Western side. It is that which needs to be addressed. If you want Pakistan to come back to the stable, normal Islamic kind of narratives, then this is where you have to bring it back. And that can be done by making sure that Indian Islamic intellectualism, our own ideological things, are all exported back to Pakistan. And there is a great taking for it, let me tell you. There is a great taking for it in Pakistan because Pakistan has not produced that kind of an intellectualism within. This is what I was speaking about. And this can always be discussed subsequently. To come back to your question specifically, the issue which I've been talking of for many years, I'll just take 2 minutes to repeat that here. I'm open completely to a critique on that. But I think a time has come when our communication strategy, the cognitive domain, has to be played in a more structured way. You can't just leave it to a couple of us here to do this, or leave it to someone else. You'll be playing the wrong narratives. You have to have a clear-cut focus and a clear-cut aim, which is why from that will emerge your entire strategy. And for this, I think a time has come in India where you need a structured body at the apex level. I am drawing a model from where I sit, and tomorrow Tara is coming to visit me for lunch there, right? That is at the National Disaster Management Authority. 22 years ago, or 20 years ago approximately, this body was set up to look at disaster. It was basically a policy-making body, not an executive body. It's not a body which launches response operations and things like that. It's a body which looks after public policy, essentially. That's the kind of body you need. The UGC, which oversees the overall education policy in the form of grants, etc. Much of that is played out in the UGC. Although you've got a whole education ministry, but you've got the UGC to play a specific role there. Right? This is what I'm looking at. Some kind of a body which looks at communication strategy, the cognitive domain of domination of Indian thinking, Indian philosophy, etc., abroad, across, and within the country itself. It has to be a multidisciplinary body. There have to be 10, 12, 15 disciplines in it. It starts from our own. If you're talking about warfare, then it starts from the military. It goes down to intellectuals. It goes down to academics. It goes down to scientific community, the economic community, all kinds of people like this who can play a major role in contributing the thought process. And it then creates a policy and has the power to task. Just like the NDMA has the power to task it. Most of the ministries come to us to make sure that their disaster management plans are on board completely with us or not. Similarly, this body can have the powers to task a ministry in sync with, of course, the controlling thing for it will all be the PMO, should be the PMO. The aspect of having multiple domains with you is that you will get inputs from everywhere. And this is exactly what I was talking earlier. Wherever there is a domain, ultimately you got to look for a focus. So how do these domains ultimately bring about a focus in their narratives to arrive at a particular aim that we want to achieve for the country? The means by which we have to do it have to be determined by this body, and the tasking for that has to be done. So this is something, it's a nascent thought. For the last couple of years, I've been talking about it. I've spoken at the highest levels of government on it. People have been quite excited by it. I even spoke in the parliament about it once, and people have actually questioned on it and things like that. So I have written about it a little bit here and there, but cognitive influence warfare or cognitive warfare, if the term warfare unfortunately puts off everyone, the it is these domains which have to get recognized in India. We still haven't understood them properly. There isn't enough research, there isn't enough academic backing for this kind of a thing. Unless, and who can do it? I think even the military institutions have not done enough on this. The College of Defense Management, for example, they should be putting across a tremendous amount of thought process on this. All the higher command courses of the three armed forces, they should be looking at this. We are so hell-bent by the romantic idea of kinetic warfare that all this does not appeal to our senses somehow. I'll rest my case there.
Thank you, sir. I think you also made some very important points uh, of media acting against the national interests in this, and then you spoke of the Islamic factor. Of course, there's been a divergence of thought in this amongst the panelists, but the way I look at it, the fact that there is divergence means that is something amiss, and we need to get balance in the way we handle this whole story. We need to have a nuanced approach, and we have to play this entire story to our advantage, which we are not doing so. Having a cognitive structure for cognitive communications and influence driven communication is very important. And for that, I get back to the basic thing: we need political consensus, we need politico military bureaucratic consensus and thinking at the apex level. Right. And an important point which did come out is that our military thinking and teaching has to go beyond the kinetic. You have to start thinking hybrid. And unless we start learning this business of hybrid right from the younger days when we do courses like the junior command course and things like that, uh, we might not be in a position to absorb the nuances of non-kinetic operations when we come to a higher level. I think we need to do a couple of things which we have not spoken, but I want to highlight is how do you weaponize our economic strength, which is something which we have not really gone into in great detail, but we have a lot which we can do. We touched it in outlines in terms of trade, but I think we need to do more. I leave it at that again. Then the issue of your next big strengths and next big weaknesses of Pakistan are food and water. Both are disappearing in Pakistan. How do you leverage this to our advantage to keep Pakistan at bay? Is a very important thing, because food and water is one thing which China can't give, and in fact, no one can give Pakistan. If any country which can come to their help in this, it is only India, and that too to the limit which we can, because as we all know, Indus is drying up. In the rivers of the waters of Indus don't reach Karachi, and salinity is coming up. And Pakistan, which was a net food exporter till about 3 to 4 years back, is now consigned to be a net food importer for the rest of its history, whatever the history is. So I think these are things also which we need to factor in, besides the other traditional domains which I was speaking of. All right. And we'll talk on. But then I'll take a few questions because a lot of questions have been shot.